All right, we should be good to go. Well, Tim, thanks so much for hopping on here with me. I've been looking forward to this call. I've followed everything that you do for a really long time, and every time I see the stuff you post, your videos, like it just blows my mind, and I'm like super jealous of all the stuff that you've done. Obviously, you had some cool videos put out by Webflow recently that highlight what you do, and honestly, everything you do is just really inspiring. But I guess before we dive into some of the questions that we got, maybe just give us a brief rundown of what it is that you do currently, what you're working on.
So I work for an agency called 368 as a designer and developer there. I was able to sort of introduce Webflow to the agency early on, and we've been a Webflow shop since then. And in my spare time, I also run sort of a YouTube channel and private Slack community for Webflow wizards, teaching interactions and responsiveness.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I love the whole, like you use the word wizard or wizardry throughout all your stuff. And I feel like that is very accurate because every time I see the stuff you're building, I'm like, how the heck does he do that? Yeah, I mean, anybody that isn't following your YouTube channel definitely should. I think it definitely is the best place to start to kind of take your Webflow skills to the next level. So yeah, the one thing that I want to dive into on this call is you and we both use Webflow, but really for very different purposes. And we kind of focus on different aspects of Webflow and the benefits that it can bring to agencies and businesses. But you definitely kind of lean more towards the side of building these complex solutions, right? Like really cool custom code type solutions within Webflow that can create awesome interactions and effects. And I guess the question that I have in terms of that is, why do you feel like these complex solutions are kind of pushing the limits of Webflow and web design? Why do you feel like that's so important for the web design community and just the internet as a whole?
Think like you said, Webflow can be used different ways and for different purposes. Like you probably wouldn't want a site like Amazon to have all these flashy interactions or like while you're trying to buy a product. So like there's different purposes for it, but a key difference of why we choose one service over another is like how it makes us feel. And interactions are a big part of that. Like it's why I choose an Apple TV remote over like a regular TV, or there's all these different things. It's the micro interactions along the way. So the way to make like really cool interactions that are actually useful to people and not just flashy and annoying isn't always easy. The flashy and annoying ones, that's easy to do, like, but when you're really intentional about making something respond to the user's actions or transition them from one place to another, that's when it gets a little bit harder and we have to understand some code to make those type of things happen. But I think it, like you said, why does it matter? Like it's all about the end user in the end. It's helping them on their journey along the way, giving them feedback each step of the way, encouraging them to keep going. So it's a big part of what we do as web designers.
And I love that. It's funny because I recently put out a video about the difference between complex web design and then simplistic web design. And the source I kind of focused on was awards.com, right? Because there's some really incredible websites on there. But the thing that kind of frustrates me is I feel like people push that complexity almost too far to where they forget about the end user, right? And then they just focus on trying to get their site featured because it has these like mind-boggling effects and things. And it's almost geared towards impressing other designers rather than the end user. And so that's one thing that I really love about everything that you're doing is it is focusing on like, hey, let's push the envelope when it comes to the way that our site functions and reacts and gives feedback. But always keeping that end user in mind, I think is always like kind of the heart of everything that we do, right?
Right. I think that's why we're seeing such a big pushback against like interactions is like people got fed up with like everything on the page being animated and it not serving any sort of purpose. And we really just need to move towards being more intentional about the things we do.
Yeah. No, I love that. Just being intentional. Yeah. I feel like so many of these websites, it's like I can't tell what direction it scrolls, right? It's scrolling left to right, and I'm like chasing buttons around as they move. And yeah, it can get pretty wild. But I certainly think in terms of what you do with your agency and then teaching other Webflow designers. And also on my end, where I'm running an agency and serving clients, keeping that end user in mind is always top priority, right? And thinking like,
Mhm.
what is the action that we want them to take? And I think if we can find a happy medium between those two, I mean, we're able to create some really incredible things that increase conversions, they increase experience, the reputation of the business that we're building for goes up, and I think all around everybody benefits. So
Web design in general is moving not away, but in a different direction from like, just take me to a sales page, get me there as quick as possible, no distractions along the way, and just sell to me. And like people are less focused on being sold to now and more wanting an experience. And like that's where the sales and the user experience and all this comes in mind. There's got to be something for them there before we just ask for a credit card. There's got to be like some experience or some value we're giving them online.
I think especially in the past couple of years, the expectations that people have for websites has increased, right? Like people,
Mhm.
like you said, they want an experience. And I see so many times that clients that I work with, they've got a website that's not completely outdated, but it's just not quite up to par. And they'll come to me and say, I think what we've got is fine. Maybe just like a slight update. But truly they're missing out on so many leads and sales because they're barely missing the mark on the expectations that people have when they click on a website. So,
Yeah.
but I do think like you said, it's some minor changes and slightly changing our focus more towards the user, and it can make a massive, massive difference for
Mhm.
businesses. And so that's one of the big reasons that within paid digital, we like to, after we update a website, even if we're not doing SEO or any sort of marketing, we like to track their analytics because it is cool to see how just a simple update in design can drastically change their engagement, their clicks, their time on page, like all of these different things drastically increase. So the next question that I had for you is about Webflow, because I love Webflow. I think it's incredible. It's for me, it's really propelled my business. It's allowed us to build things that are far more incredible and user friendly than what we were using before, which was WordPress and Wix. But I guess the next question I have for you is, how has Webflow changed your life and your purpose and your work, both in the agency and I guess for your YouTube channel and your content?
Yeah, I mean, I found Webflow towards the end of my college like experience, and I started freelancing for different clients using it. And I think it's a big part of why I have the job I have today. Is during like my interview, I said, "Hey, I know this tool where we won't have to rely so much on developers. Designers can actually start to create some of these sites themselves." And that was a huge like selling point, I think, even if they weren't totally sold on the idea yet. So, and then it's also changed my life just being able to like impact others. I never would have dreamed having like a YouTube channel, being able to teach other people, which is like my favorite thing to do is teaching. So like just even having that outlet, I don't know if I would have it without Webflow.
Moving towards talking a little bit more about your community and your subscriber base. One question that I was kind of curious about is, what do you feel like is the question that gets asked the most? Like, what do people want to learn from you?
It's always advice about like learning custom code. Like I do a lot with CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and now GSAP, which is an interaction library. And it's always like, what are the steps I should take? What resources should I look to? And it's kind of hard for me because like I wasn't professionally trained in all this. I didn't go to school for it. So I'm very much self-taught. I'm like, Google is your best friend, like Google for everything. But it really comes down to just putting it into practice, everything you learn. It's so easy to get caught up just watching tutorials back to back and never actually using the stuff you learn. But like just learn a little something, try it, learn something else, try it, and just keep repeating that process of learn then do. And I think that's the best way to see like progress over time.
Well, I think the other thing that's cool about Webflow, and especially what you're doing, is you rarely put something out that doesn't have a clonable to say like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like download this clonable, reverse engineer it, like dive into it, see how it works. And then, like you said, just putting it into practice, and you're just continually increasing your skill set within Webflow, right? And then
Yeah.
when you come to a point where you're like, hey, like I need this specific experience for this website, like you can kind of dive into your toolkit of experience and practice, but also the clonables that you provide and other creators are providing. And it really is a really efficient way to grow quickly in the Webflow space. So no, that's really cool. Well, again, I would just plug your content. As I was looking through stuff, I know you've got kind of like a library of all of your clonables. What's the best place to kind of find more of those clonables and learn more from you other than just your YouTube channel?
Webflow.com/tricks is a list of all my clonables. So yeah, you can just cut all the code from it and then follow along writing the code yourself, seeing like which each line does to the actual, and it's all built out. So you don't have to worry about building it. So
awesome. Yeah. Sweet. Well, I'll make sure to drop that down in the description of this video, just so people can find that. But yeah, that's an awesome library for people to dive in. So
thanks.
Awesome. So the next question that I had was about freelancing, because for me, my big focus of everything I do is like, I love freelancing. I love finding clients. I love, I have an agency with, right now, I think we're 8 or 9 people deep. And that's kind of been my big focus in using Webflow to freelance and serve clients. But for you, do you do any freelance work? And if so, do you enjoy it? If not, why don't you freelance?
I did freelance work early on when I first started working for 368, just outside of after hours and such. And I did enjoy it. Like, it had its ups and downs, like working over weekends. I found myself doing that a lot. I didn't enjoy like writing proposals or sending invoices and all the stuff that comes with like that part of it. But once my YouTube started like picking up momentum, I quit freelancing and just focused on my agency job and that, because it's just a lot just between those two. And yeah, and I enjoy being able to just focus all my time on doing the work and then teaching other people how to do it and not have to worry about the nitty gritty of all the other stuff.
Yeah, no, that certainly is true, that when you get into freelancing, it's like really only maybe 10% of what you do is actually design and development, right? It's like once you become a freelancer, you're focusing on marketing and sales and paperwork and everything that goes with that, client communication, and it does become a lot. And I feel like for me, even though like I use Webflow every single day, I certainly am not the most skilled Webflow user, because so much of my time has gotten taken up with those other things. And honestly, when 75% of my day is sales calls now. And so it definitely just is like, different preferences and skill sets and what you love to do. And I feel like your skills in Webflow are in a place where you shouldn't be doing anything else other than that, because you're just on another level. So, and I think that focusing on YouTube is a great way to like build an audience and reach more people and make a bigger difference, right? Like you can, with one video, you can reach thousands of people and change their lives, versus like me, I can land one client and that project can take months. And I really am only affecting that one client. And so that is a big draw to YouTube and content. But I think that's really cool. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, the next question that I had, and we talked about this a little already, but is in terms of these complex solutions and how sometimes they can compromise maybe the sales or conversions of a website. Because as I dove into this more, one thing that I kept coming back to are these like website conventions, right? The things that people get used to. A couple examples of these conventions are the logos in the top left-hand corner. When you click on that, it goes to the homepage, right? It's just something people expect out of a website. On mobile, you've got a hamburger menu up in the top right corner. Yeah. Your site scrolls up and down. Like, these are all things that people just expect out of websites. I guess, do you feel like it's appropriate to push those boundaries or change those conventions? Or how can we walk that line to make sure that we don't compromise people's experience?
That's a great question. Like, it all goes back, like we were saying earlier, to being in service to the user. So, I mean, it's scary when you're doing something outside the norm and conversion is like a high priority because you're like, what if I really mess this up? But like, there's times where I think it's important to do. And we had an example like with a client we were working on where there was all these different industries and we knew people coming to the site were only interested in one industry. They didn't want to see all the other stuff. So it's like we could go with a traditional drop down menus, big hamburger menu, whatever. And every time the user wants to navigate a subpage, they're going to have to open up their industry drop down, go to the subpage they want and navigate like that. It's like, or we could make an adaptive nav with cookies where you choose your industry from the homepage. And from that point on, the nav is custom tailored to the first thing you chose.
That's cool.
And you're never going back to or seeing those other industries. Of course, there's a clear way to get back, but then navigating subpages on mobile or whatever, you don't have to open a drop down each time. It's just one click to do that. And I remember we were pitching this to the client and our UX team was using all the user personas that he came up with. This is Rebecca. She's interested in becoming a artist for the music industry. This is how she's going to find her studio. And this is the path she's going to go through. And at the end, like the clients were amazed. The creative director had literal tears of joy, which has never happened before in my career. But when it's something like that, where it's in service to the user, you don't have to sell it. It's just like, it makes sense. It makes sense. You're not complicating it for the sake of complication. You're doing something to help someone. And I think that's the line. It's just knowing when you're doing it for yourself or when you're doing it for someone else.
That's an awesome example of what I see becoming the new conventions of web design, right? Like simplifying the whole customer's journey through your website and changing navigation based on what they're interested in. And those are things that I feel like we need to get to a point where that's just standard, right? Like that, because you're getting people where they want to go faster and they're enjoying the process along the way. That's really cool. Well, after our call, I'm maybe going to get some of these resources. If you have some of these examples of things like this that you want to share, again, I'll make sure I drop them down in the description. And I would love to dive into some of those as well, because I feel like even off the top of my head, I can think of a couple clients that could really benefit from something like that. Cause we've built some massive like mega nabs with a million different options. And sometimes I'm like, dude, like this navigation could literally, like you could spend hours going through this thing. It's ridiculous. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to us a little bit about, I know you have a Patreon. I know you've discussed before with me about potentially doing a course, but talk to me a little bit about what you're working on and then how people can find you and how you can help them.
Yeah. So I'm working on sort of a course for Webflow wizards is what I'm calling it. And it's for people who've already gone through something like Flux Academy or Webflow University. They understand basic Webflow interaction, CMS, and layout, and they're ready to dive a little further. Maybe that's with custom code or understanding interaction fundamentals. So I'm calling this the course that will never be finished. And the reason for that is I'm always going to be updating it, adding to it. When new techniques or new things come out, I'm just going to replace some of the older videos. And you kind of pick and choose what you need. So if you're working on a site that needs draggable functionality, you'll go to that lesson. If you don't, then you skip over that lesson, come back to it. It's a living, breathing resource that you use when you're building a site. And I try and put them in sequential order as much as possible so that concepts build on top of each other instead of having to relearn everything in every single lesson, kind of go through in order. So yeah, that's live right now. There's like, it's free and paid, I guess. So I can give you the link to that. But basically, some of the lessons are on my public YouTube channel and some are just on Patreon. So you can go from there. And also with Patreon, there's a private Slack community we do. So people can ask questions and get feedback on their work and different things like that. We do monthly meetups and different things like that. So that's kind of like where my focus is building that right now.
Definitely, I recommend anybody to check that out. And I love that idea of a course that's never finished, because it is like this ongoing thing. Like there are always new things to learn and new capabilities that that people are discovering and unlocking. And so definitely think that's a great resource for people to just continue to like hone in their skills and just become yeah, become wizards, right? So
Yeah.
I love that. Cool. We'll make sure all those things are linked down below. Honestly, this has been awesome. Like I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. And every time we do a call, I'm like, I just want to like let you share your screen and just dive into everything. We could, post a 10-hour video here on YouTube, but I think we'll wrap things up here. I guess, is there anything else that you can think of that you would recommend for people that are just wanting to get to that next level with Webflow?
I think just try something that's out of your comfort zone. I always give this advice. I feel it gets repetitive, but that's the way I've learned, is trying something that sort of scares me and like, I don't know if I'll be able to figure this out. And it like pushes you to go forward and research and do what you need. And that's the best way to learn, I think, is just trying something new. So yeah.
Love it. And just taking time to do it, right? It's easy to get caught up, no matter how we're using Webflow, whether we're freelancing or working for an agency or whatever it is. It's easy to get proficient in Webflow and then just continue to do what we know, right? But setting aside time every day to learn new things, to, dive through clonables and see how they're built and reverse engineer them, and watch Webflow University and your content, all the other content out there on YouTube. But just setting aside time to improve and just learn new things, I think is invaluable. So, but awesome. Yeah, Tim. Well, honestly, I've loved our chat. Really, I appreciate you coming on here. If any of you that are watching this have not yet subscribed to Tim's channel, I would definitely recommend doing so. Yeah, go subscribe. Like this video if you enjoyed it. If these are things that you all like to listen to, we'll continue to put stuff out like this. And I'd love to have you back soon, Tim. But thanks so much. And we'll chat again soon.